Hello guys, and hope you are doing great. So today we're going to be doing this castle, medieval castle in Blender, and yeah, I'll be showing you how to make the water animated and basically setting up the scene. This is going to be a semi time lapse. It's going to be a little bit sped up so that it's not too long, but yeah, hopefully you enjoy the process. Yeah, so I started out by creating the environment. I've been watching a lot of Unreal Engine tutorials, and I like how they usually start somewhere and not just from scratch, with a nice looking environment. So this is what I tried to set up first, with a sky and a nice horizon, so that it's not boring. You know, whenever you start with a blank canvas, it's always easy to give up because you don't really see enough progress. So that's why I set up the world to look somewhat interesting with a nice, basically make it look like what you would see when you start up Unreal. They always have a nice horizon. They start with some clouds and a nice sky to look at, so that their lighting is set up. I also set up my environment to work with the sun, because usually the sky texture in Blender doesn't support, doesn't match with the rotation of the sun object. So I add a sun object to control my sky elevation and sun rotation directly using a sun. That's a story I showed in a previous video. If you want to watch that, I'll be leaving a link in the description for that. The project files are going to be available to my patrons and my YouTube members if you are interested in getting those. So all links are going to be in the description. Also, I haven't streamed in a while because I'm still figuring out how I'm going to work with this channel. I have two channels, Top Channel 1-on-1, this one, and Top Channel 1-on-1 2, that I think I might start streaming on, because I want to keep this channel for more polished content, where I spend more time, a little bit more time on the project, so that I can produce, give you a more detailed with consistent quality, because you never know with streams. Always a lot of things usually go wrong. You can't really be, there is no guaranteed of getting something as you expected. Streams are usually a bit harder to it's the wild west of content. You never really know how to what's going to happen, and I want to keep this channel a bit polished, so that's why you see I might separate the streams on the I may choose to add the streams on the second channel, and then more polished content on this channel. So yeah, here I'm setting up, I'm kind of blocking out the scene, and I also got some assets from Megascans to use. Here you can see me adding them to my asset library, which is my own add-on for collecting assets like this, and use them quite easily. You don't really need any of the add-ons that I use here, but they make it very simple, very quick for me to use when I'm working on projects. You can of course use the built-in asset browser, which comes built-in in Blender, but I prefer using my own version because it's very compacted and quickly easy to use. I don't have to do a lot of setup to get it to work. Every time I load a project, I can just search for whatever item I want in the side menu, as you see me doing here, and just add it in here. So yeah, the Megascans assets you might get might be a bit different. May have the colors might look a bit different, so you might want to do some color correction. That's what you see me do here. As you can see, the colors were a little bit off, so I had to add in some RGB curves and just to tweak them to match the other assets, because you have you have different assets that were scanned at different locations and at different time, so obviously they're going to have they're going to look a bit different. It's up to you to try and adjust their colors a bit and get them to look right and consistent with the other parts of your project. Yeah, so I sculpted the rock, and sculpting, unless you spend a lot of time on it, you're rarely going to get enough detail on it. So that's why I'm getting these Megascan assets and then putting them around the rock and hiding the low detail areas with this high detailed rocks from Megascans. And again, I'm using my asset library here, and I'm using texture folders to import in some textures, play around to get rocks that are going to match with the rocks from Megascans. You can see this one, I like the texture of this, but the colors were a bit off, so that's why I'm adding a mix color node with a few tricks to get it to look to get it to match the colors the same, to match with the other rocks in the scene. Yeah, so again, the project files are going to be in the description. As I said, this is mostly going to be a time lapse because there is quite a lot to do here. Yeah, and yeah, so I'm using the same rock here and scaling it up in different directions, and I think I use about two rocks, but mostly this. Actually, I think I use this only this type of rock with the one I sculpted to get the hill looking like that, and I just moved around things a bit, scale them up, scale them down, randomize the rotation to get the rock to look where I want it. And you can see I've already locked in my camera where I want my camera to be, and that helps me to focus on the areas that where the camera is going to see. So I knew that the cursor is going to be up there, so that's why I'm using a shrink wrap to flatten that surface. You can flatten it using by sculpting it, but I found just scaling it down with shrink wrap turned on might be a bit faster than just going in and sculpting. Again, I'm adding extra rocks. This is like building a Lego wall using Lego blocks. Just pick some assets and mush them together and just get things to look good like that. Yeah, I was having trouble with because I have a new setup. Some of my textures are not importing in correctly, and I haven't really gotten around to collect all the textures that from my old PC. So that's why you see that I had some missing textures there because I had to upgrade. So yeah, I wanted two hills, and so the original hill I first created, I added it into a collection and then duplicated it as an instance. That's why. So I have the same hill as an instance put on the left side there, and that's how I managed to get those two hills. I'm using a mountain I created from a previous live stream. If you watch that, if you watch my live stream, you know this mountain. I use it a lot. It's best of a displacement texture that I use. I use a displacement texture on a displacement modifier on a plane, and I just easily get that at work. I wanted to add in some volumetric, but I didn't want to add in actual volumetric, so I have this plane with a gradient texture set to emission and giving me that horizon height volumetric exponential height volume that if you use an Unreal Engine, you know what I'm talking about. It's just yeah, you can actually see that. So here I'm trying to create the castle. I wanted to keep things very, very simple. I didn't want to spend too much time. I only had a few hours to do this. So I'm also getting this reference guy to help me out with the scale of the scene. Yeah, so I wanted to make things very, very simple. I didn't have a lot of time to create a castle, a high detailed castle. So I wanted to just use a few tricks to make it seem like a high detailed castle without doing a lot of work. That's why you see I'm just using a few blocks and some textures that I made previously in a different again live stream. I usually like to use my previous content that I've created. Never do everything from scratch. You will never finish a project if you approach projects like that. That's why you see me reusing content quite a lot here. So one other thing you see, I also added a solidify modifier because I wanted to procedurally adjust the thickness of the wall, and I also wanted to easily add in windows without doing a lot of work. You'll see me adding windows in a moment here, but I also added this tower thing from a previous project. And yeah, when I create a project like this, I always go back and collect all the assets that I might want to reuse in a different project and save them in my asset library so that I can reuse them whenever I want, as you can see here. So yeah, you might also recognize some of the pieces that I'm using here. So Okay, so I want to show you how I made the water animated. To do that, I just had the ground like this. You can see I just sculpted this very easily and added a plane. I'm going to first expand it, scale it up like this. This is just a plane, and actually it's not the plane I'm going to use. I'm going to just, I can even remove it for now and just use a grid object, because a plane doesn't really have the resolution we need to pull off this. So I'm going to connect the grid. The size can be increased as well, and we need a lot of subdivisions, because what we want to do is capture the water line or the river bank as a mask. So I'm going to need a lot of resolution for that. So let me turn on wireframe so that I can see how much resolution I've added. Okay, something like that. Now to get that, we need a proximity node. So let me add that geometry proximity, and this is going the grid. The target is going to be the island or the land. So let me get an object, or just, yeah, so this is the land. I can connect it as a target. Now if I preview this distance, I'll connect the original, connect the grid, I can see I'm already starting to see something. Yeah, make sure you have this set to relative so that you can see the mask like that. Now that is the mask for our riverbank, and if I scale this up, you can see that the mask updates as well. You can also, if I go to sculpt mode, let me go back here. I need this to be to maintain the preview. I need this to be pinned so that when I select another object, it doesn't disappear. So if I for example sculpted this in sculpt mode, just added a few elements. Let me see. Go out of sculpt mode, you can see the mask updates as well. So how do we use this to animate the river? So this gives us, so we can use this as coordinates for the X, and then Y we can use a different, let me show you basically what I mean. So if I go to the material node, actually I need to first go back to geometry nodes and store this mask into an attribute. So I'm going to create a store attribute named attribute, and just use this distance as the value, and I'm going to call this water. The attribute name, I'm going to give it water line. Go to the shader, let me split this shader, create a new shader. Let me call this W, and set material W as this, and you can see that's where we are. We can turn off this, can even remove the preview. Am I even seeing that? Water 1, and I use that as the mask, as the material set here. So now I can come in here and use attributes, the attribute node, and I want the water line, so I'm just going to copy that and paste it in here. Previewing that, you can see that we're seeing the water line already, and we are going to grab a texture gradient, or a gradient texture, because we want to generate some coordinates to have this water animated. And so we have this. We can grab our noise texture, connect this into a bump map, so vector bump, and now if I preview this, don't need this yet, I should be able to see some detail. Let me make this a bit darker and quite reflective. Let's see how our water looks. If I play back, nothing happens, but we can use some coordinates. If I use Ctrl T on this, I can add texture coordinates, but the only thing I need is the texture coordinates. I don't need this mapping. And what I'm going to do is just come in here, set up my own texture coordinates that will allow me to animate this. And I'm going to use this gradient which runs from left to right, or runs on the x-axis to generate, let me use a combined node here, to feed that into the x coordinates of the combined xy. Basically, I'm trying to create my own coordinates that I can use for the noise texture. So if I feed this directly into the vector, you can see that our noise is scaled on the x-axis because that's how the gradient is running. And then I can use this here as my y coordinates, and I basically have coordinates looking like this. If I look at this, you can see that the water is distorted, especially at the river banks. I like that, but that's too much distortion. I can just mix using RGB mix, color mix RGB. I mix these coordinates with the original generated coordinates. So at 0 we get the original coordinates. If I blend in these, you can see we start to get some distortion along the river bank. I like that. So now to animate this, all you need is to animate the gradient. So if I look at this, you can see how the water is being distorted at the river banks. And I can just reduce the intensity a bit, like that. And to animate this, all you need to do is add a math node to the gradient, and just animate the add value here. So you can see how that basically have an animation. That's how I did the water.